To import email, phone, and address lists into the List Bucket software, first make sure you are in the Import module by clicking here where it says Import. This will take you to the Import module. You will be taken to the part of List Bucket where you can import email, phone, and address lists. If you are in another part of the Import module, such as the page where you view import logs or remove Do Not Call records from the database, click on the Import a List option on the left menu to access the part of the application where you can import email, phone, and address lists. A few basic ideas need to be explained first before we demonstrate how to import lists into List Bucket. Firstly, when records are imported into List Bucket, you must select the uniqueness criteria for the records. This is done using the List Type selection box, which has two options, Phone List and Email List. If you select the Phone List option, then the list which you are importing will not duplicate any existing records with the same phone number. In other words, if a record in the file you are importing has the same phone number as one which has already been imported, another record with that phone number will not be created in the database. Similarly, if you select the Email List option, then the list which you are importing will not duplicate any existing records with the same email address. In other words, if a record in the file you are importing has the same email address as the one which has already been imported, another record with that email address will not be created in the database. When the application tries to import a record which has, depending upon the uniqueness criteria you chose, the same phone number or email address as one which already exists in the application database, the existing record will be updated, or the record from the file will be rejected. When we say a record gets updated, what we mean is that the information other than the phone number and email address, things such as the first and last name, the company name, and the street address, get updated. We will explain shortly how the application decides when a record gets updated from the information from the file and when it does not. Secondly, when records are imported into List Bucket, you can specify whether or not the records from the list you are importing are white hat records. When a record is specified as a white hat record, the information for that record will not be updated when the record is re-imported later. By re-imported, we mean that it has, depending upon the uniqueness criteria you chose, the same phone number or email address as a record that has already been imported. If a record is not specified as a white hat record, then, if it is re-imported later, it will be updated with the information for that record from the file. This means that, for a given record which is being re-imported, if the first and last name which is in the imported file for that record differ from the first and last name which are listed for that record in the application, then the record in the application will be updated with the first and last name from the file. We will use the term black hat to refer to records which are not white hat. Also, in order to import email and phone records into the application, those records must be in a .csv file. Also, prior to importing a phone, email, or address list into the application, there are several pieces of information you must enter about the records you are importing. The first piece of information you must enter is the title for the list of records you are importing into the application. Later, when you want to view the log of records imported into the application, the list of records which you are importing here will be referred to by the name you provide. Secondly, you specify whether the records you are importing are white hat records or not. Next, you must specify whether all of the records which you are importing all have the same SIC or NAICS code, or whether the SIC or NAICS code is specified for each record in the file. If all of the records have the same SIC or NAICS code, then choose the option called Enter SIC or NAICS code for all records. Then choose either the SIC code for all of the records or the NAICS code for all of the records. If the SIC or NAICS code is specified for each record in the file, then choose the option called Map SIC and/or NAICS code on mapping page. This is the option we will choose. Next, you must specify whether the file with the records you are importing came from one of your clients or from a list vendor. In the drop-down box below, choose the client or vendor from whom you receive the list which you are importing. Then, as we explained earlier, you must choose the uniqueness criteria for the records, which is done from the List Type selection box. Lastly, you must locate the file on your computer which contains the phone, email, or address records which you want to import into the application. Note that this list must be in a .csv format. Each column in the .csv file must have a header name. In addition, if you chose the phone number as the uniqueness criteria, each record must have, at a minimum, a phone number and a company name. If you chose the email address as the unique criteria, each record must have, at a minimum, an email address and a company name. Once you have located the file with the records which you want to import, then click on the Next button. You will be taken to the mapping page. Basically speaking, at the mapping page, you tell the application what kind of data each column in the file being imported represents. For example, you may have a column in your file which is called First, which represents the first name for each record in the file. At the mapping page, you tell the application that this column called First represents the first name of each contact in the file. And you do this for the rest of the columns in your file. For example, the phone number of the contact, the company name, the street address, etc. Here, we will demonstrate using the mapping page while importing a file which contains, for each of the records in it, a first name, a last name, a phone number, a company name, and the full mailing address, which consists of the street address, city, state, and zip code. As you can see, the columns which are in the file are listed in the box on the right. To tell the application that the column called First is the first name for each contact in the file being imported, select the radio button next to First and then click on the First Name button. Next, do the same for the column from the file named Last, which represents the last name of each contact in the file. Do the same for the rest of the columns in the file. Also, note that one of the things that can be mapped on this page is the area code for the phone number. If the area code is provided as a separate column in the file with the imported records, then you need to map the 3-digit area code and the 7-digit phone number separately. If we go to the bottom of the mapping page, you'll notice that there are two other areas to map: SIC code and NAICS code. Recall that earlier we could choose whether we wanted to specify the SIC or NAICS code for all records in the file being imported, or whether each record in the file has its own SIC or NAICS code. If we had chosen the option to specify the SIC or NAICS code for all of the records in the file, then we would not have to map the SIC code and NAICS code columns. However, we chose the option that each record in the import file has its own SIC or NAICS code, so we must map at least one of these two columns as well. Once you are finished mapping all of the columns in the file, then click on the Submit button to import the file into the application. During the import process, some of the records in the file which you are importing may not import correctly. Once the file has finished importing into the application, you will see a report which shows a summary of records from the file which you imported, which were rejected for one reason or another. At the top of the page, you can see a summary of the information about the imported file itself. Below that, the following figures are shown: the total number of records in the source file, the total number of records which were successfully imported, the total number of records which were updated during the import, and the total number of rejected records. Below that, there is a breakdown of the reasons for all of the records which were rejected. These are reasons why records can be rejected during the import process. The company name is missing. The company name must be provided with each record that is imported into the application. Records that were rejected for this reason were missing the company name. The phone number is invalid. The phone number of each imported record can contain special characters, such as dashes and right and left parentheses. But the phone number must have either 10 digits or 11 digits, with the first one being the digit 1. Also, if the area code is provided as a separate column, then both the phone number and the area code can contain special characters, but must contain 3 and 7 digits respectively. In addition, if you have specified the phone number as the uniqueness criteria, you must have a phone number for each record, and any records which are missing a phone number will be rejected. The zip code is invalid. If a zip code is present for a record, it must be either 5 or 9 digits long, with or without a dash between the 5th and 6th digits in a 9-digit zip code. Otherwise, the record will be rejected for having an invalid zip code. The email address is invalid. If an email address was provided with a record which is being imported, the email address must be a valid email address. If you chose the phone number as the uniqueness criteria, note that the email address is not mandatory, even if there is a column in the imported file to which you mapped the email address. However, if an email address is provided for a record, the email address must be valid. If not, the record will be rejected. In addition, if you have specified the email address as the uniqueness criteria, you must have an email address for each record, and any records which are missing an email address will be rejected. The record which is being imported duplicates a do not call record. If a record has been previously imported, then marked as do not call, but then re-imported again, it will be rejected. There is a separate video which explains the portion of List Bucket which allows you to tag records as do not call. The record which is being imported as a black hat record, but duplicates an existing white hat record. If a record was imported at some point as a white hat record, but then re-imported later as a black hat record, it will be rejected. The record which is being imported as a white hat record, but duplicates an existing white hat record. If a record was imported at some point as a white hat record, but then re-imported later as a white hat record, but from a different source, it will be rejected. By source, we mean either the client or the vendor who provided the list. Recall that the client or the vendor for the records which you import into the application is specified at the first page, which is shown in this video. The record is missing the SIC or NAICS code. Recall that at the first page you visit when importing a phone, email, or address list, you chose whether to specify the SIC or NAICS code for all records in the file, or whether each record in the file has its own SIC or NAICS code. If you chose the option that says each record in the file has its own SIC or NAICS code, then each record in the file must have either an SIC or an NAICS code. If a record is missing both, then it will be rejected. If you want a printable version of the entire page, click on the Print Summary button. If you would also like to get a list of all of the records which were rejected, you can click on the Export Listing of Rejected Records button. This will give you a list of rejected records as a .csv file, which you can open directly in Excel or save to your computer. Another report which you can view here will show you the quantity of records which were imported for each SIC and NAICS code. To view this report, click on the Close button. You can get a printed version of this report by clicking on the Print Summary button. You can also download a list as a .csv file of all of the records which were successfully imported by clicking on the Export Listing of Imported Records button.